I'm 29 and I recently got a call from my mother. I hadn't talked to her in almost 5 years. She said she needed my help because my sister and her husband had just gone through a tragedy. Here's some background. The man who is now my sister's husband was once supposed to be my husband. My sister Melissa, who's 27, hooked up with my fiancé Lucas, 29, on the day of my engagement. Lucas and I had been together since college, and he proposed to me after almost 5 years of dating. He'd thrown a party for us to surprise me on the night of our engagement, and I still remember feeling like I was on top of the world. Until around 1 p.m., when I decided to go out into the backyard for better reception and caught my sister all over Lucas. They were making out so passionately that for the first couple of seconds, they didn't even notice me standing there with my mouth wide open. I couldn't believe that he was doing this to me after almost 5 years of togetherness, and on the night of our engagement, no less. When they finally did take note of me, they broke apart instantly, but it was too late. I made a run for it, got into my car, and drove as fast as I could to the nearest hotel I could find. I was hyperventilating because I was so shocked at what I had witnessed. I was somehow trying to process it and willing it to be untrue. Then I received a text from Melissa saying that she was sorry, but she was in love with Lucas, and apparently this had been going on for a really long time. I was in the hotel room when I received that text and broke down like never before. After Melissa, Lucas texted me pretty much the same thing and said that he had only proposed because he felt that if he committed to me, he would be able to push Melissa out of his head. Obviously, that hadn't worked, and it made him want Melissa even more. He told me that it wasn't about me, but this was about them, and they just knew that they were meant to be. I was just a placeholder and the way for Lucas to finally meet Melissa. I stayed at the hotel for a couple of days and tried to put my act together because I was still feeling crazy and trying to force myself to believe that this was just a cruel prank that life was playing on me. After almost 4 days, I finally went back home because I did need to collect my stuff and rejoin work if I didn't want to get fired. When I showed up at home, I realized that my family had been living with Lucas under the same roof, waiting for me to come back. It would almost be touching had it not been for the circumstances under which I left. Everybody had been trying to text me and get me to respond relentlessly after I disappeared, but I hadn't replied to a single one of those texts. So, needless to say, there was a lot of chaos when I finally came back. Everybody made it a point to hug me and tell me how glad they were to see me. Even Melissa had the audacity to come to me and give me a giant hug with tears in her eyes when she saw me. I was too disoriented to even react to that and just stood there like a silent statue while everyone clamored around me. Then finally, once everybody had calmed down, I cleared my throat and told them that I was back only to take my things and move out for good. Lucas had just been standing there without a word until that point, but when I said that I was going to move out, he announced that there was no need for me to leave because he'd already packed his stuff and was going to move in with Melissa since now everything was out in the open anyway. My family, my parents, my aunt, and my dad's youngest sister, who has lived in the same house ever since her husband passed away, actually had wide smiles on their faces, even though there was nothing to smile about, at least not according to me. Melissa was standing beside Lucas in an awkward hug and looked at me very sadly but still smiling. I couldn't take it anymore and decided to ask my family what the heck they were even smiling about because, as far as I was concerned, Melissa had just broken up my engagement and stolen my boyfriend of almost 5 years. There was really nothing very funny or sweet about this. My mother chose to speak up at that point and told me that they couldn't go back in time and change the past, but they could accept the future, and they knew that the future had Melissa and Lucas together in it. Granted, it was a relationship that had formed out of cheating, and they did feel sorry about it, but they also wanted me to understand and accept that this was for the best. Melissa said that she was very sorry for taking my boyfriend away from me, but she couldn't help falling in love with him. She wished that she could have told me earlier and I didn't have to find out this way, but apparently they were madly in love and wanted to spend their lives with each other. Then the two of them kissed right in front of me, and my mother had the audacity to even wipe a tear from her eyes. I snapped and told them that this wasn't supposed to be sentimental or emotional, and that what they were doing was disgusting. To my surprise, my family seemed to get annoyed with my behavior and told me that I was being too bratty about the situation. Instead of being happy for my sister, I was making this all about myself, and they didn't approve of my behavior. I was shocked by their attitude and immediately told everyone to get out of my house. I couldn't believe they were defending what Melissa and Lucas had done while making me seem like the bad guy. They acted like I was overreacting. My father stepped in and told me to stop acting like a child. He said these things happen and I should just take it in stride. He wanted me to celebrate that my sister had finally found her soulmate instead of being jealous of her. They were literally all acting insane, and I couldn't deal with it anymore. So I just said screw it, went into my room, packed some of my things, and left yet again without even speaking to them or waiting to hear them out, even as they called out my name and told me not to go. I really didn't have anything left to say to them because it was very clear to me that they cared more about Melissa and her happiness than about me or even about what was right and wrong. They were so caught up in trying to justify what Melissa had done that they completely forgot that I was also a human being with real feelings as well. After that day, my family tried to contact me several times, but I never responded to them because I didn't think that I owed it to them. A couple of weeks later, I even received an invitation to Melissa and Lucas's wedding, which I declined, obviously. All the common friends that Lucas and I had also declined the wedding invitation in solidarity with me. Even a couple of relatives who knew the truth refused to interact with my family after they learned how they had treated me in the aftermath of the party. It's been 5 years and I have pretty much cut them out of my life entirely. They occasionally tried to weasel their way back into my life by wishing me well on my birthday or New Year, but I always ignore them. I never even blocked any of them, even though I did remove them from my following and friends list. Since I have a public account, they could see what I was up to, which is what I wanted. I wanted them to see and to know that I was leading a fabulous life and keep burning with jealousy. It was petty, but it was the least I could do after how they screwed me over. Up until recently, I barely even had a clue of what they'd been up to in the last couple of years. My mother called me about 4 days ago from a number that I didn't have saved. When I answered the call and realized that it was my mom on the other end, I immediately tried to hang up. But she begged me desperately for one chance to talk to me because apparently they were in dire need of help. I agreed to talk to her for just a couple of minutes, but only because she sounded so upset, and my humanity didn't allow me to turn my back on her at that moment. She told me that Melissa and Lucas had started a business of their own a couple of years ago, but it was failing badly. Their investors were all backing out because they were failing to make any profit at all. So they borrowed more money, but even that didn't help their business, and now they were neck-deep in debt, and the loan sharks were all after them. They were being hounded by everyone from their employees to their investors and the people they had borrowed money from. My mother knew that I lived a luxurious lifestyle and could afford to help them out, so she had turned to me as a last resort and was begging me to help them out by loaning them some money so they could pay off their debts. It was no small amount either that she was asking me for. It was almost $75,000 that she wanted me to give her so she could help Melissa and Lucas out. I asked her why Melissa wasn't calling me if she needed help and why she was making my mother speak to me on her behalf. My mother told me that Melissa and Lucas didn't even know that she was coming to me for help, as they had given her strict instructions not to approach me because, I guess, we all still remember exactly what happened 5 years ago. Melissa didn't want me to know any of this and wasn't ready to take help from me, but my mother didn't know anybody else who would have that kind of money and would give it to them at the drop of a hat. A couple of months had already passed, and Melissa and Lucas were struggling to even put food on the table. My parents were helping them all they could, and even Lucas's family were trying to give them all that they possibly could, but it was just not enough. Even they had to be able to support themselves in the future, so it was impossible for them to just give away all the money that they'd saved over the years, especially because most of my family was retired, and so were Lucas's parents. That's why my mother, with no other option left, had called me to request help. Now, I could afford to help them out, but I really didn't want to. Melissa was right for not contacting me to ask for help. They lost the right to make any demands from me the day that they cheated on me. I told my mother that I couldn't help them, and even if I could, I wouldn't. My mother sounded very upset and told me that I was being cruel and needed to think about my family. I told her that Melissa and Lucas hadn't thought about me when they had that affair, and neither did my family think about me while they were supporting the two of them. So right now there was no need for me to think about them either. I had worked hard to get to the position where I am today, and I wasn't about to just go and drop $75,000 on two people who didn't even deserve it. My mother then began to cry on the phone and told me that she had never expected me to grow up to be so selfish. She claimed that my sister and her husband would end up in big trouble if I didn't help them out. I said that it was just too bad, but I couldn't help them, and then I hung up. Since then, my mother has been sending me several texts every hour begging me to reconsider and think about my sister for once. She said that this was not the time for petty revenge and that the trouble Melissa was in was very serious. If I didn't help her now, I really would regret it in the future. She's being crazy, and I don't understand what to say to her because I don't want to feel like the bad guy here either. Am I the asshole for not helping my sister out financially after she stole my fiancé 5 years ago? Update. So I finally blocked my family. I didn't do it earlier because I wanted them to see what I was up to and feel jealous. Plus, I was afraid that cutting them off completely might be something I'd regret if anything bad happened to them. But I don't really care now. I should have removed them 5 years ago. I don't understand why I even kept them around so long. That is what was petty of me. Refusing to help my sister out now isn't petty. It's just the logical thing to do. They'd already wasted tons and tons of money, and I'm sure that even if I give them the money right now, they won't be able to repay it. $75,000 is a pretty big amount. I might be well off, but that doesn't mean I can just drop that sort of money and not expect it back. If this was a close friend of mine who I was helping, I still would expect that money back. Here, these are neither people who are close to me nor my loved ones, nor can I expect them to pay me back. So there's really no reason for me to help them out. It's as simple as that. I told a couple of my friends about this too to get their opinion on it, and they agreed that I did the right thing by refusing to give them the money. Not even out of a feeling of revenge, but mostly because it was completely impractical and stupid to even expect me to help them when they were the ones who had screwed me over in the past. But anyway, my mother is blocked now, and she can't contact me to guilt-trip me anymore, so I have nothing to worry about. Update 2. Hi guys, something really big happened today. I was at work when I received a call from my neighbor saying that there was a couple outside my house who was screaming for me to come out and talk to them. My neighbor told me that they seemed pretty crazy and had been screaming at the door for about an hour, refusing to leave. I asked her for a description of them, but in my heart I already knew who it was. She told me how they looked, and it just confirmed that I was indeed going to run into Melissa and Lucas. When I got back home, my neighbor told me that I needed to come back and deal with this because she didn't think that these two were up to any good, and I agreed. When it was Melissa and Lucas that we were talking about, they could never be up to any good, so I thanked her and started driving back home immediately because I couldn't risk them getting into my house at any cost. I arrived in about 15 minutes and caught them trying to break into my house by picking the lock. I pulled up in front of my place and asked them what they thought they were doing. I tried to call the police right away, but Lucas was quick. He rushed over and knocked the phone out of my hand. Melissa also walked over to me and told me that they were here just to talk and they didn't want anything from me, not at the moment at least. I told them to make it quick and also said that they shouldn't expect me to invite them inside, so whatever they had to talk about had to be discussed out there in the yard. They seemed to be okay with that, which was a relief because I really didn't think that it would be a good idea to invite those two inside close quarters. They already seemed pretty hostile, so I didn't know what to expect. Since they said they didn't want anything from me, Melissa started talking. She told me that my mother had told her about the phone call and how I'd ignored the subsequent text from her and then even blocked them all. She told me that the way I was behaving was very unfair and that it had been 5 years since then, so I should really be over it by now. Instead, I was resorting to such silly and dramatic acts just to get a little bit of attention from my family. She said that she felt very insulted because of how I had refused to help them, and that's what she was here to talk to me about. She said that she'd been able to arrange the money for now, but there was a very strong chance that she might need more in the future. Because she'd sold their house and all their jewelry to get the money this time, she obviously couldn't do that again. So she had to know that she could fall back on me and rely on me for help when she needed it. I told her that no, she couldn't, and she must not count on me at all under any circumstances, because I hate her and her husband with a passion. I was so angry that I also told her that it was taking me a lot of restraint to not hit her at the moment, so it would be in their best interest to just leave. Lucas had the audacity to say that they weren't going anywhere until I signed a document that would confirm that I would give the money in the future whenever they needed it. I mean, it wouldn't even be valid if I was forced to do it under pressure. I'm pretty sure there are laws against it, and also they must be insane if they actually thought that they could manipulate me into signing something like that. I told both of them to get the hell out, and Melissa pushed me, saying that I had to help them because apparently I owed this to them since they were family. And I couldn't just run away from my responsibilities like this. I was shocked that she'd actually pushed me and I was about to slap her, but I controlled the urge to do that because things would only get worse if I got violent. Instead, I decided to grab my phone, which had fallen to the ground when Lucas knocked it out of my hand and made a run for it. I climbed into my car as quickly as I could and then drove off without even bothering to check my rearview mirror. I hadn't bothered to shut off the engine when I had left the car, so it was still running, and it didn't take me much time to get a head start on them. Obviously, they were not stupid enough to chase after me on foot, so they just waited there at my house, which was pretty unfortunate. As soon as I was a safe distance away from them, I decided to call the police and tell them what was going on. Then I drove back to my house just in the nick of time before the police had already arrived within 20 minutes. I filled them in on everything and they arrested and took Melissa and Lucas away. I knew that the charges weren't that serious and they would get off pretty easily, but it was still worth it because at least they were taken away and I didn't have to waste any more of my time with them. It's been a couple of hours since then, and I haven't heard from anyone in my family, which is strange because I'd figured that by now at least one of them would have tried to contact me from some other numbers. But they haven't, so I'm guessing that they're either just over everything and aren't going to try and get under my skin again, or they're just waiting it out and biding their time so they can contact me later when things are a little less tense. Update 3. Hi. So the last update was about a week ago, and I'd honestly started to believe that my family was actually not going to bother me again because I had called the cops on Melissa and Lucas. But I was wrong. Even that didn't stop them from disturbing me yet again, and this time it was my parents who showed up at my house asking me if they could speak to me for a moment. This happened yesterday, and they seemed a lot less cocky and arrogant compared to Melissa and Lucas, so I let them in. My mother started crying pretty much as soon as she entered the house and told me how sorry she was that she'd ever taken Melissa's side over mine. My father told me that after they learned of Melissa and Lucas being arrested because of their behavior, and also that they had physically pushed me, they couldn't bring themselves to look at them the same way, and had decided that they were going to cut them off. My mother continued to cry throughout the time that she was here, while my father explained that they were apologetic for siding with Melissa in the past when it was actually me who was the victim. While I said that I did appreciate them for finally coming to their senses, but right now it was too little and too late for things to get better. I was used to living my life on my own terms now, and I didn't want to go back to putting my family before myself. So as much as I appreciated their visit and apology to me, I really couldn't promise them that I would work on this relationship because I just didn't feel that there was any point in trying to salvage an already ruined relationship, even if it is with my parents. They protested a little at that point and said that we could fix this if we wanted to, but that was exactly where the problem was. I didn't want to anymore. I just wanted to be by myself, that's all. And I told them I respected their efforts, but I was done here. They seemed a little disappointed, but eventually they left and asked me if I could at least unblock them so they could keep in touch. I have unblocked my parents, which feels weird